I am Dariella Nieves, and you are Kicking It With Me. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Kicking It With Dari show. Today, I'm going to talk to you about dealing with friends that have hurt you, whether it's surviving a friendship breakup or how to move a friend from one category of friendship to another. Maybe they were a really close friend of yours, and you're, still talking to them a little bit, but you're not necessarily wanting to be close with them. Like maybe you want to move them into the acquaintance category or something like that. So I want to talk to you about this kind of whole frenemy type of concept. And I'm basing it off of a book that I read years ago, actually. There's a book called When Friendship Hurts: How to Deal with Friends Who Betray, Abandon, or Wound You. And it's written by a female psychologist named Jan Yeager. She and I actually became Facebook friends after I wrote a book review about it on my blog years and years ago. But I want to share this with you in the context of the podcast because I started this podcast 3 years ago, and many of you did not know about me or my blog back in the early 2000s. So I'm going to go ahead and share this with you because this is a timeless subject that I think almost everyone listening can relate to. Surviving a friendship breakup, or maybe not realizing that you've been unfriended and you find out on social media, different things like that. So we're going to dig into this, and I will link to things in the show notes that you can use as resources, whether it's the book I just mentioned or other podcasts that I've done related to this friendship subject. Do you remember a tagline back in the day on commercials that used to say, "Friends don't let friends drive drunk"? Well, I think that friends just should not hurt friends. That's the way it should be. There's a saying, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. All these things are kind of related. And sometimes people have trust issues because of being backstabbed and hurt by friends. And so this is what we're talking about today. What about those friends that just suddenly stop all communication with you and just ghost you? No reason, just nothing, just out. They're just here one day, gone the next. Betrayal and abandonment are really hard to forgive and forget because you're probably sitting there trying to wonder why, especially if, this person was cool with you and you didn't think that that you did anything to them to deserve that. You almost expect it, when you're dating, that's kind of lame, but that happens a lot with dating. But when it comes to friendship, we really take it a lot harder. I've mentioned in previous podcasts that my best friend, I had a female best friend for a long time. And for some reason, I lost her friendship a few years ago. This was before I got married for the second time. I don't even know if she knows that I got married again, unless she, was talking to my mother or something like that. But I still, to this day, don't get it. So I want to say it was like Christmas time in 2015. My sister was having brain surgery in the hospital, and I was actually in the hospital with her. I traveled up from Atlanta to Virginia, where they live, and I had told my best friend, I'm coming for Christmas. We're going to hang out, whatever. And so she knew that I was there in Virginia, but I went to the hospital, visiting with my sister, and most of my family was crammed in that room. And I want to say it was Christmas Eve, and she called me, and there was like a ton of people in there, and there was just no way I could have a conversation with her and everybody else. And so I just said, listen, call me back or I'll call you back. Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you tomorrow. And for the remaining, week, 10 days that I was in town, nothing, crickets. Never heard from her again. I tried to call her. I don't know if she tried to call me. I don't know what had happened, but it was just like nothing. And when I went back to Atlanta, I tried to call her several times, and she never answered my calls ever. I think the first time she answered, and I think that what I did was I pressed the red button quickly. So when you press the red button quickly on your cell phone, your phone doesn't ring much. It only might ring once or twice, and then it cuts you off. So it appears that, you're hanging up on the person. And so she called me back and she was like, you hung up on me earlier. And I said, well, yeah, because, I was mad and I'm not, ready to talk to you right now. There was something, I don't know what it was. It was something stupid. But she decided not to take my calls anymore. And so that was just it. And it was the dumbest thing ever. I was friends with her for 10 years. I cannot tell you all the things that I gave her advice about and, the sisterhood that I thought we had. But like I said, we're no longer friends. That is the only real friendship breakup that I have endured as an adult. And I go out and meet a lot of different people and just never really gotten that close to anybody except her. So, I missed her for a while, and then I met my husband and he became my best friend. And then, of course, as you know from my previous episodes, I lost him a few months ago. And so when he died, there was another best friend that I lost. So I understand what it's like to break up with a friend or lose a best friend. And so I'm giving you some of the high points, I think, of this book by Dr. Yeager that I believe apply to all of us who have dealt with or are dealing with, some kind of drama with a close friend. So the premise of the book talks about the realities of friendship gone wrong. So, like, how do you deal with toxic friends? And why do some people have a pattern of picking the wrong friends and then end up getting used time after time? And how can we choose positive, healthy friendships that enrich our lives and spot them early on, weeding out those frenemies that are waiting to happen? Well, let's go back to the basics and define what a friend is. In this age of social media, people throw that word around like it ain't nothing. Just like the word love, really. People use the word love to mean lots of things that maybe they really don't mean. Like, oh, I love that color. I love that song. I love this couch. I love this car. I love this person. But do you really love it? Do you really love them? And it's kind of like that with the word friend. You can friend and unfriend someone on social media, namely Facebook, or you could follow or unfollow them, and you could do all of it at the click of a button. Just press the button and you don't see their information no mo. And because the word friend can mean so many things, it's hard because when you get into a friendship and you start developing a friendship, most of us don't sit around with ground rules about, okay, you're going to do this, you can't do that, or whatever. There's a lot of things that we just assume about our relationship when it comes to another friend. And maybe we shouldn't assume that. There's this thing called bro code and there's a girl code, things that you just feel like you wouldn't do to another friend of the same sex. Like, for instance, like talk to one of their exes in a romantic way, or date them or sleep with them. And I'm going to talk about girl code in another episode coming up soon. So look out for that. But these are things we typically don't do. We don't sit down and make a friendship contract and say, you will do this and you won't do this. And if you break these rules, you ain't my friend no mo. That doesn't happen. We don't do that. But maybe we should. Maybe we should talk more, be a little bit more clear about maybe not so much the written contract part of it, but just the communication of, the way that you're going to conduct yourself, your character and your integrity and your loyalty, because those are the things that really count, I think, when someone calls someone else their friend. For the purposes of this episode, when I talk about a friend, I'm talking about a platonic, non-romantic, non-sexual relationship between two people that seem to, have something in common, like each other, enjoy each other's company. Not necessarily talking about spouses or siblings, even though those can be some of the closest relationships that we have. We're just talking about what I just said. Now, P.S., if you want to hear my show about platonic relationships, I interviewed author Pamela Naidoo about whether or not males and females can be just friends. And that's a completely different subject. You can go ahead and check that out. I believe it was May of 2017. I don't have the episode number, but just look up Pamela Naidoo on the website, kickingitwithdoree.com. Now, I'm going to break down a few different categories of friendships because all friends are not created equal. You've got your casual friends, which you probably have several of, and they can also be, called acquaintances. Most of us do call them acquaintances. And then you've got close friends that people normally don't have a ton of those. You might have 4 to 6 close friends at the most, because it really takes a lot of time to develop those relationships and maintain them, especially as an adult. And then best friends, people that are like your BFFs, normally you don't have but a few of those. You can count them on one hand. You don't normally have 20 best friends. Again, for the same reason, it takes a lot of time and energy to foster and maintain those relationships. And it should, because that's a person that you love and care about. The author also discusses traits that people should look for in friends, like, thinking about their character, their trust, their level of empathy, and their honesty, which is very important because nobody likes a liar. For example, like if you were having a discussion with a friend, let's say you're doing the friend contract thing on the low or something, when would you say is an omission of information tactful versus dishonest? Like if you're going to omit information and not tell somebody something and leave something out, some piece of information, are you doing it to be tactful, to be respectful, to not hurt their feelings? Or are you doing it because you sort of don't want them to know you're trying to get around it without technically lying? Really, that's kind of deep right there. But those are the types of things that friends care about depending on the situation. The way you and your potential friend will view this answer and other tricky ones reveals a lot about your compatibility, because if you guys don't have the same value system, then you might bump heads a lot with these types of things, and you may not necessarily want to be this person's confidant and give them your deepest, darkest secrets. They might need to go in that casual acquaintance category, okay? You feel me? Also, you need to be aware of these like pseudo fake friends that pretend to be your friend. They're fair weather friends, they're foul weather friends, if you want to call it that. And they consistently only appear in your life and show up when things are or are not going well in your life. They're not just always around. They're not just like through thick and through thin. It's like they're there to kick you when you're down and tell you, or they're only there when, the money is flowing and the drinks is flowing and everything is on the up and up. So you don't want a fair weather friend like that. And it doesn't take long to figure out if a person is like that. It's also important to try to detect harmful people before they can even become your friends and sizing them up, She's got this chapter. The author has a chapter that talks about 21 different traits of people that you do not want to be your friend, acquaintance, anything. You don't even want to know their first name. One of the things that all of these traits have in common is crossing a boundary or reacting to their friend based on their own emotional state, whether they're feeling jealous, insecure, depressed, or they're just uncomfortable. That's, real shady right there. The author advised that it's best to end a friendship if that problem has severe effects on the friendship, which it undoubtedly would. Because, unless they're getting professional help and they're working on it, they're going to portray all of that stuff on you. You don't need somebody that's constantly jealous or insecure or depressed and not working on themselves, like not trying to do nothing about it, putting everything back on you. It's always someone else's fault. Yeah, that's a headache you don't need in your life. And it's bad enough when it's a coworker. You get to choose who you hang around with, who you spend time with, who you talk to on the phone at night. So make it somebody that doesn't have all of that unless they're dealing with it and not bringing it in your face all the time. Another important thing that the author mentions, which is really easy to overlook, is that we can and should identify parts of ourselves that are described in these traits, because nobody's perfect. All of us have a little bit of all of that. Maybe some of us have a lot of it, but it's easy to see it in someone else if you have ever dealt with it before, or if you have a little bit of it in yourself. Reality TV makes it easy to point these things out, and it can be entertaining. But it's a little bit too easy to point the finger and tell somebody what they're doing wrong, because we see ourselves differently than others do. And this is why, we have that term self-deception, because you're deceived or in denial about your own stuff. Now, there's another section of the book that digs deep to examine reasons why friends betray each other or even try to enact revenge. There's people that have different levels of self-awareness. They may let negative emotions that they have inside and life's changes and challenges, whether growing apart in a marriage that they're dealing with or changes at work, whatever, relocations, things like that, having children, so on and so forth. those things can strain or end a friendship as well, even friendships that span for decades. Like I talked to you about in the beginning, my friend and I were cool for a good 10 years. I guess it can happen to anybody. This is a direct quote that I want to lift up because it's really paramount to this whole thing. Because when we have difficulties in friendship, we tend to take it personally. So this is directly from the book. Check this out. As hard as it is, remember that jealousy is not about you. It is about what your success or example stirs up in someone else that causes her to have the need to make you feel bad. The other person feels inadequate and threatened by you, so she does the only thing that she is capable of doing to retaliate. She criticizes you, pulls away from you, withholds praise, or ignores you, or devalues your accomplishments to try to make you feel as bad about yourself as she feels about herself. I think that is so profound right there. Go ahead and run it back again, and I'll wait, and I'll be here when you get back. That is so profound. There's also another part of the chapter that talks about why people grow apart, because it's a natural part of life for people to grow apart. There might be types of friendships that are just situational, those friendships are only there, because let's say you're a coworker, you guys are in the same place, and once one of you leaves that company, then it's like, okay, we're not really friends anymore. Not that we're not friends anymore, but just that we're not going to talk anymore. It's not that we don't like each other, but it's just a situational thing. We were only friends in that context. And then there's other reasons why people grow apart. Maybe someone is maturing and the other person isn't. There's all different kinds of reasons. And we talked about this in a couple of my earliest episodes back in 2015. Check it out. August 2015, I had a few episodes about this called Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me? Take a listen to that. It's all in the family. The way we interact with others, it starts from role patterns that we learn in childhood. Kids who had toxic parents, sibling issues, or abuse have learned to see themselves in a negative light and could consequently choose friends who fit those same patterns, according to the author. The best way to deal with this is to acknowledge and deal with these issues if they exist, so you can change how you see yourself for the better, and then change how you react to others and make different friendship choices. And, I'm going to say it, you need therapy. Go ahead and get some counseling, because you need to be able to talk to someone objectively that is trained in these types of situations that can help you kind of get out of your own way so you can sit outside yourself, unpack the issues, think about them, and then see what's in you that is either allowing the behavior to continue with that other person, that negative behavior, or that negative self-talk that you have. Good old question. Can this friendship be saved? That is a question that comes up when there's something drawing you to that other person and you don't want to stop being friends with them, but you don't want to continue on fighting with them all the time and feeling bad all the time. Now, one suggestion the author has is to put yourself in her place to create empathy and decrease your anger against her. Now, I know this would backfire for me because when I do this, I got this super analytical nature about me, and I will be reasoning everything, and I'd probably still feel like I'm justified for how I feel, or that they're not justified for what they did to me. But in any case, creating self-awareness instead of going straight to blame and projecting are other suggestions that the author gives, as well as using I statements during a confrontation to diffuse the other person's defensiveness. I talked about I statements a lot in a previous podcast. There's just so many different things that I'm thinking about here that I've already talked about, but I interviewed people in these other shows that I'm telling you about so you can get their perspective and say that this is something that is not just you. We are not alone in this. And the I statements and the alternatives to confrontation with someone are something that I talked about with my friend Lakia Brandenburg in an episode back in 2015. So I'll link to that in the show notes as well. When and how to end it. When you're in limbo about whether to end a friendship, you need some guidance for sure. And so there's a chapter that talks about that. And it helps to try to minimize the likelihood of retaliation by that person for breaking up with them. And it also talks about doing this with your child's friends, especially if they are dealing with bullies or gangs or other unhealthy company. Now, I want to shift focus a little bit and talk about mixing friends and work, the whole thing about being friends with your coworkers. It's something that I usually only see on TV, If you notice, most of the time on primetime shows, they've got the cast in a work situation and they're socializing together too. And it's not really like real life as far as I'm concerned. These people are always going to the bar together or sleeping together. They do everything together. It's like these other 5 people are the only people that they know in their whole life. Okay. And, it's a TV thing, but maybe there are some of you listening that really are cool with your coworkers and do things outside the office regularly. I know that many people that I know, like myself, keep their professional life separate from everything else. But this is a good section of the book where the author is talking about having casual friendships at work, but not close ones. She said casual friendships are safer with few exceptions. I remember when a coworker tried to friend me on Facebook, and he was somebody that worked and lived in another country from me, but I just ignored him. I just thought that was too weird for him to know my personal business and stuff. I just think that's weird. I don't know. I'm not going to be Facebook friends with my coworkers. I'm just not going to do that. But anyway, the author also notes that one of the most challenging work situations is when one person is promoted over another, especially if both friends were at the same level. I didn't really have an issue with this. I had a situation where me and another writer were doing the same work, and then one of them was promoted to being my manager. Actually, this happened twice, and I don't feel bad about it because, believe me, I am not trying to be a manager. Y'all got too many meetings for me. Let me do my work in peace, and I'm good. But there was 2 different ladies over the years that were promoted to become my managers. They both eventually left the company at different times, but I didn't really see it being a problem. I had no issue with it. And maybe it's because we were just coworkers, Again, we were not living in the same place. We lived in different states. But I do recall I guess I went to visit New York City years and years ago, and I did stay with one of my ex-coworkers that had become my manager before she left the company, and everything was cool. Her husband is actually someone that she met working for the company, and they stayed together all these years. So, it can happen. You can have friends at work and date somebody at work and get married. There are some success stories, but I don't think that the author is recommending it. I certainly wouldn't, at least not without a lot of caution. So anyway, there are 10 rules that the author gives about having friendships at work, and I'm just going to mention a few of them here that I want to highlight. One is to use your best judgment, of course. You need to avoid or withdraw from situations that would cause a potential conflict of interest. There's a saying in the Bible that you should avoid the appearance of evil. So perhaps you're really not doing anything wrong, but if something looks like, something kind of shady's going on, you might just not even want to put yourself in that position where someone else could, take a picture of you, Snapchat you, and say that you were in this compromising situation, maybe where drinks are involved or something like that. So just be careful to not put yourself in a position where there's a conflict of interest or that it would make you look unprofessional or like you don't know what you're doing. Number 2, you got to stay away from gossip. You've got to stay away from that water cooler, okay? Get your water and keep it moving. Especially if something is going on that's supposed to be private and just, something that has not been announced to the whole company or unconfirmed by the person involved. That gossip, there's no place for it in corporate America. There's no place for it in the workplace. It's just not professional. Turn off that Wendy Williams side of yourself, and you can turn it back on when you get in the car to leave, to go home. Number 3, be careful of your conversation and your body language when you are forming friendships with the opposite sex. And this is assuming that the opposite sex is heterosexual. I guess what the point here is that You need to make sure that you're keeping everything professional. There's a theme here. There's a theme. Number 4, if you are dating someone in the workplace and you are deciding to not be professional with this person, after hours, you got to be even more careful and make sure that everything is legit and on the up and up when you're in the office. You don't want your relationship to affect your performance nor how others see you. And you don't want to be obvious that you're a couple. You may or may not have to hide it depending on your policies and all of that. But remember, this is a relationship that you have with a coworker. And what if something happens? Not trying to put anything on you, but it is really, really bad when people break up in the workplace. It can wreak havoc. So you've got to watch your back. Now I come to a section that is completely in my lane, and that's finding good friends. That is something that I struggle with every time I move, is trying to find some good friends. And I usually find a few, but then this whole, adulting thing gets in the way, and I don't always get to really develop those friendships the way that I would like, being a single mom and all. I guess it'd be different if I was just single, but being a single mom or being a divorced mom, being a widowed mom now, what I am, still single mom. Now, as you know, people slowly develop trust by sharing confidences while they're doing activities together and having experiences, not just by talking. And the friendship develops from there. I think that's a key statement because a lot of people, say that they feel like they're friends with someone that's on Facebook, or maybe they're doing the online dating thing and they think that because they spend 2 hours a day on the phone with somebody that they're so super close and they're soulmates. You've got to do activities and have face-to-face time with someone with any kind of relationship in order for it to truly stick. An interesting point here is the notion that it takes about, according to the author, 3 years to develop a tried and true friendship, because that is the length of time where the realities of life have tested the friendship, whether it's a relocation, a marriage, divorce, promotion, job changes, having children, and so on. My sister friendship that I mentioned in the beginning of this show was someone that I was friends with for 10 years before we broke up. And so, with everything that we've shared with each other, it just still baffles me that we're not speaking. But it's her decision. And I just made a decision at that point in time in early 2016 that I was not going to chase after anyone to pay attention to me, male or female. Not gonna do it. Ain't happening. I was in my late 30s at the time. No way. I don't play those games. Now, some people choose not to make new friends on purpose because they're just really super, super shy or introverted, or they're fearful, or they've had too many bad experiences with friendship, like maybe some of the ones that I just mentioned. Now, where do we go from here? You got to have an action plan to cultivate new friendships and rekindle the old ones that you actually miss. The key is to make friendship a priority and be available for activities and events where you can have fun, learn, and share experiences that bind you together. I know this is really challenging when people get married or have children or both. There are lots of people that I have wanted to hang out with and they weren't able to make time for me because of, having a spouse or having children, and children's ages are also important too. So like, for instance, I've got a teenager. If I have a really, cool person that I know that I want to develop more of a friendship with, but she has little babies, like 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds, children of different age groups require different amounts of attention. My 15-year-old doesn't require herself to be in my face all the time the way she did when she was 5. And so I understand this. There's some people that don't understand that, but I do. And same thing with someone that might be divorced and maybe they have their kids every other weekend. I've got to understand that if I'm going to, even though we're not really talking about dating so much in this episode, we sort of are. And it's like, I have to understand that that person has their kids every other weekend. That's not negotiable. You never ask a friend or a date or whoever to choose you over their children. Like, who are you? Like, no. Don't even let me know that you even would do something like that. And so that makes it hard. Makes it hard to have and maintain adult friendships. Sometimes, like in my case, we want to know why a person has stopped talking to us and rekindle a friendship. But the truth is knowing the answer may not satisfy you. People talking about, I just need some closure. If the person has ceased communication with you, they may or may not remember why they did so, or they might deny it, or they could blame you, they could ignore you, they could drudge up old stuff, and it just starts the madness over again. So it might just be best that you decide to let it go and move on. There's a really excellent blog that I love about these types of feelings and closure and all that good stuff by a woman in England named Natalie Liu, and her blog is called Baggage Reclaim. I will link to an article about closure from that blog in the show notes. She discusses a lot of relationship topics there as well about, having good boundaries and your self-esteem and things like that. But the whole thing about closure, of course, is applicable here when we talk about friendship breakups as well. So to close out, I have to agree with Dr. Yeager that you have to start with yourself. Befriending yourself will make it less likely that a friend can betray you or that you will tolerate their toxicity long enough for them to do so. I did a show, again, another reference. Christina Hallett has a book called Own Best Friend, and she actually just wrote a new book that just came out. But Own Best Friend talks about being your own best friend, and I'll link to it. It starts with you. If you don't respect yourself, then you'll allow others to treat you badly and then wonder what's wrong with you, when really you need to wonder what's wrong with them and then keep it moving. You've got to be a great person, a great mother, a great friend, a great human before you can expect someone else to be that for you. And sooner or later, we're not an island. We're going to need somebody and they're going to need you, what you have. So it's best that you are not wounded, not hurting. You don't need to be worried about frenemies and having anything lagging in the background. So check out all the resources in this episode. I will have some more episodes coming up on a bi-weekly basis where I'll be talking about these types of things even deeper, not just with friendship, but things that we just need to understand about ourselves so that we can get ourselves right before we can get our relationships right. So this has been a great episode. I'd love to know what you think about it. You can email me at kickingit@DoreeAllen.net. And kicking it is KICKINIT. There is no G. We are not kicking anything. We're just kicking it, okay? So thank you so much for listening, and love to hear your friendship stories and have your comments, questions, know what you think about all of this, and if you're dealing with a friendship breakup or what have you, all right? I will be back in 2 weeks for another episode. Take care.